Welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG podcast. We are so honored and privileged to have with us today Christine Ury, who is the Chief Legal Officer and the Chief Sustainability Officer at Engie Impact. So I would love to have you start, Christine, by telling us about Engie and Engie Impact and what's the difference.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for having me on the show today, Pamela. I am very passionate about the ESG subject, particularly for the legal field. So my great honor to be able to come here and talk about it. To answer your question, Engie is a global energy company. It's headquartered out of Paris and has operations around the world. We work primarily in expanding our renewables. We have been shifting our energy production base for quite some time. We also provide natural gas access for a lot of the European continent. Engie Impact is a division within the Engie Group that works with global Fortune 500 companies to put in place their decarbonization strategies using both consulting and digital services. We'll work with a large company who has a global presence in many different facilities or industries, and get down into the weeds with the executive team on, okay, how do you make net zero really happen?
So it's quite unusual, number one, to have an energy company so far along the journey of transitioning, let alone have a division that is helping other companies do the same. So far as you know, are you the only energy company that's doing this?
Yeah, we're certainly one of the leaders in the area, and I think the largest player to have gone this far along. We've set a net zero target for ourselves for 2045. Going net zero in the energy industry, there really is no tougher industry to decarbonize.
So yeah. I'm also curious about your title, because so far you're the only person I've met who carries both titles, the Chief Legal Officer title as well as the Chief Sustainability Officer title. How did that come to pass, number one? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of wearing two hats?
Yeah. I started out my career as a lawyer, as you probably could have guessed, in a law firm, coming up in a business law firm, doing typical work, M&A, financing, contracts, all of that. I spent about 8 years with the law firm practice, and then I decided that I wanted to do something different with my life. I wasn't sure what that was, but I quit my law firm job. I spent a lot of time looking at different industries and sectors in our economy. I ended up deciding that I really wanted to be part of a business. I personally believe that business is the greatest force for change that we have, at least in the United States. That's the big mover at the table. And I wanted to be in a business that had a greater purpose for improving the world around us. And luckily, there's a lot of those. At the time, an opportunity came up for an in-house legal position at a company dedicated to sustainability. It's Ecova was the name of the company at that time. Ecova was later acquired by Engie, and I've been with the company in different roles and forms ever since. From day one at Ecova, I was involved in the sustainability program. I started out just as a volunteer on a leadership team that was helping our sustainability officer at the time set the strategy for the company. I was, part of a cross-functional group that worked on that for a few years. And I want to say 2017, I took on leadership of our HR in the US in addition to legal. At that time, the sustainability program reported up through HR. I began then learning what it meant to be a leader in that area, getting more involved with CSR and how we do the strategy, how we work with the folks from across our company and reporting on it. Then in 2019, we did a really internal merger where we brought together several different parts of Engie from around the world to form Engie Impact. That's really when our current configuration came. And at that point, we wanted to move the sustainability to an actual executive title, to the Chief Sustainability Officer title, in order to signal how important it is to the executive team and to the company that we walk our talk when it comes to sustainability. I was fortunate enough to have our CEO at the time ask me to take on that role. He knew I was passionate about it. I'd been involved with our program for a long time and really trusted me to set a path and lead the company forward.
So the big question, number one, is workload, but perhaps even beyond workload, how do you find the sustainability side of your responsibilities collaborating with or linking to the legal side of your responsibilities?
So I actually do more than legal and sustainability. I also have responsibility for our health and safety and our real estate portfolio. So I have a lot of hats, and there's two questions in there. One is how do you do it? And I'm a big believer in paying attention to your who you have on your direct reports leadership team first. My most critical job function is to make sure that I have the right leaders in place across the globe. I hire very good people who are able to act independently and problem solve. They engage me when it's a global problem, something that involves the whole company, if they need my advice and so forth. But I have an incredible team that does a ton of work and helps support me in accomplishing everything that I'm responsible for. The very interesting thing, though, is how all of these pieces come together, because it wouldn't be obvious. An example, though, risk management. Let's think about risk management for a bit. Right now, my legal team is developing a risk management program for a particular kind of work we do that has a little bit more engagement on client sites and some particular risks to it. In terms of where we're implementing changes in energy efficiency equipment and lighting installation and that kind of thing. The risks that you encounter there are health and safety risks that come into play. So by having the legal team engaged in that, we're able to have the visibility to bring that in, and also environment. So we're able to bring into the legal work we're doing. We're also aware of our environmental resources and to bring those in at the same time. Similarly, another overlap we find is in the area of stakeholder management and human rights. So you think about some of the advice we give touches in those areas, and our corporate sustainability director is fantastic at training and doing workshops on, hey, here's how you engage with a community dialogue on it. So there are what I created and I'm really proud of is a team of professionals that are experts in different areas, but they leverage the visibility they have and the roles they have across the organization to support each other.
And your structure certainly reinforces the idea or the concept that ESG is really a holistic lens or framework to assess the risk and the strategies of the business, right? And so because of the role you play and because of all the different teams you lead, you are the hub of all of those spokes and are leading in all of those areas, which to me is beautiful, because I think it is not so efficient or effective to have completely independent silos working separately from each other, when in fact it's all interrelated.
Yeah, absolutely. For sustainability and ESG, it will not work if you just have, your one or two specialists that are isolated. You have to figure out how to integrate them into the broader business, because you will need support from your operations, finance, HR, leadership, the legal team. If it's not in the legal team, you really have to bring everybody to the table. What I love about that, coming at it from with the legal team, is fantastic, because the legal team touches every area in the business. The legal team has huge visibility across the business because they interact with all the departments. They're involved in every client deal that we do. They're involved in every compliance thing. So they are able to bring in a visibility for a corporate sustainability program that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Yes. So I'm curious what you're seeing in the GC community, the general counsel community, with respect to embracing ESG and wanting it to be part of the legal department, or, over my dead body, sort of, I don't want to take on ESG in addition to everything else I'm working on. What are you seeing, and is it evolving?
It's definitely evolving. I find there's some really interesting studies on this, and I shared some data. So last week, it was in a cute Valentine's Day infographic. The most recent studies show that general counsel have 26% of general counsel have responsibility for at least some aspect of ESG. And so general counsel are definitely getting involved in this area. I think that trend is likely to continue for two reasons. Number one, as the regulations heat up, more and more general counsel will need to get involved. We see the SEC reporting standards coming out. We also see we will see more and more influence from the CSRD that was enacted in Europe. It will be, I don't think a lot of American lawyers are very aware of that yet, but it's going to become a big player. I liken it to the impacts of GDPR on how we do things. So there's going to be that regulatory push. The other thing that's happening, though, in general, there's a trend with chief legal officers to broaden what's in their portfolio. Part of it is that corporations are always looking to be efficient on the executive team, and to share that load across the executive team. So the legal counsel can be a multi-role player that helps expand the coverage that you have on the executive team. And I think it's also a recognition that legal professionals can do more than stay in their narrow legal box.
Mm-hmm. You touched briefly on CSRD and made the comment that not many lawyers, especially here in the US, understand what the implications are going to be of that, and perhaps even of the SEC disclosure regulations that are expected anytime. So what would you like to see when it comes to ESG support and advice from your outside counsel?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, I think that right now is a huge opportunity for outside counsel to start building relationships and playing in this space of ESG. But they need to bring a little bit different game to the table. So the knowledge of what the regulations are, that's table stakes. You have to know what the regulations are and how they impact your business, and if you have to do disclosures, what those disclosures include, all of those things. But the real opportunity is when you're seeing general counsel take on these broader responsibilities, is helping them navigate and figure out how to execute on those. So being a more full spectrum partner for general counsels that are suddenly finding themselves in a bit of an unfamiliar world.
And I would say that's an unfamiliar world for most lawyers that are in private practice, because most lawyers at law firms practice in a specific area. They give specific advice, and it is rare to find the lawyer who is a true business advisor holistically beyond, my area of practice or my specific expertise, but taking a look at the client holistically and bringing in the key expertise you need in certain areas.
I would agree. And part of this, I'm talking about, the greater change I would like to see in how outside counsel operate, not just in an ESG capacity. I do think that ESG presents a unique opportunity to make that change because of the level to which general counsel are getting involved and the breadth of the impact that it will have.
I completely agree. And I also would love to hear your thoughts on, law firms as one of your vendors and suppliers, because clearly most companies are assessing their suppliers, assessing their vendors, not just from a risk management perspective, but from the whole ESG performance and practices, and choosing to do business with those that are aligned or those that are making progress in these areas. How do you apply that lens to your outside service providers?
Yeah. That's a great question for me because my business's setup is really similar to a law firm in that we are B2B service provider, professional services. We provide consulting services. So a lot of the challenges we have are similar to what a law firm might encounter in this area. We receive from our clients all the time questionnaires on what our practices are for the environment, for carbon, for DEI, for everything ESG related. And our clients, which are Fortune 500 companies, again, expect us to be able to provide that information, expect us to be making progress, have targets set on all of these subjects, and show that we are good corporate citizens across the board. I can't imagine that large law firms are receiving anything different. They must have the same kinds of questions coming in. And what big companies are doing, they're going through their spend, their external spend. They're finding where do we have significant spend, and in a lot of cases that will be with law firms. Then they're going out to those vendors to see, hey, are these folks aligned with our strategy and our values by asking these questions. It also comes up in RFPs. So a lot of times, I know when I do an RFP for a larger project for outside counsel, I'll include questions about their sustainability program, what they're doing for diversity, all of those things, looking to see, is the law firm aligned with our values and buttoned up. I think the focus on this is only going to continue as you see companies adopting these net zero standards. So particularly in a net zero standard, what's called scope 3 refers to your supply chain. You're required to have information on your supply chain's carbon footprint and to be working with your supply chain to drive that down. Now, law firms are probably not a big piece of the carbon footprint of a lot of companies because they are B2B. Most likely their biggest carbon producing area is travel. They may have some offices, possibly some commuting, but largely travel would almost certainly be the case. Nevertheless, when you're looking at that from a client perspective, you'll look at it also from a spend perspective. And if your spend with a law firm is significant, then you're going to be asking for that data and expecting the law firm to take action. I think law firms are going to see more and more requests for data on their ESG topics, even if it's not phrased as ESG, it might be phrased as environment, it might be phrased as social, it might be phrased as diversity. But in these subjects, and in particularly with carbon, their law firms are going to see more and more need to pull together their carbon footprint.
And I would venture to say that while there are a few global firms who have already started that work, some for a number of years already, I would say most law firms have not yet started the work of even measuring their baseline carbon footprint, let alone making commitments for targets and progress. So there's going to be a lot of work ahead of them, I believe. So, and this may lead right into my next question. What are your predictions? Like if we talk again in a year, and I'm using a very short time frame because this area is evolving on a daily basis. But if we talk again in a year, what will have changed in the legal profession with respect to ESG?
I think that I hope that more legal professionals will realize that this is an area that they need to wrap their head around and they need to start learning about. Right now, I believe it feels very foreign to a lot of legal professionals. This is a reaction that I get in my LinkedIn posts. I post on ESG and sustainability quite a bit, and over the last 2 years, I've seen people becoming more familiar with it, and then also that the level at what I post, I can tell that right now they're really at the level of wrapping their heads around the high level concepts and the next steps and leaning in to needing to know what those are, kind of wanting the information, but needing it in a format that speaks to in language they can understand and in steps that are practical and applicable. So I think that trend will continue. And my hope is that you'll see more legal departments just implementing simple steps that they can do to start integrating ESG. A few that I recommend: look at your supplier agreements and see and think about adding in a climate clause so that you can collect the information from your suppliers that you need to collect. Look at your risk management process. Start including ESG factors as risks if they're not already there. Look at your governance structure. Who is responsible within your governance structure for really reviewing environmental and social risks and in line with the business and making decisions about that? So there are these steps that counsel can take within their in-house departments every day that can make a big difference in kind of in getting a platform. And then as outside counsel, similarly, you're helping your clients with supplier agreements. Think about asking them, hey, should we consider adding a climate clause so that you can collect climate data? Because when you get to wanting to report on scope 3, you're going to need that data, not from, to be clear, not from all suppliers. If you're, hiring a caterer for an event, they're not going to have their climate, their footprint or whatnot. But if you're, buying significant goods from a manufacturer, something along those lines, then you need to really consider that providing yourself a way to collect that data. And outside counsel can start suggesting those practices, or if you're helping your clients set up a governance structure, raise these questions in terms of, okay, what is this going to be handled by the full executive team, by a committee? Is board reporting required? How involved does the board need to be? All of those things. It just starts bringing it from what is can be thought, it feels a little foreign and people might want to silo into, okay, this is just how we do business.
Yeah. So to that point, are there any groups that exist? I was going to call them support groups, but I don't mean to sound derogatory. Are there groups that exist of general counsel or other lawyers that are working on this matter that you could recommend to our listeners? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's a group that I absolutely love called Lawyers for Net Zero. It's out of the UK, but they have membership expanded outside of that area. And they really specialize in training in-house counsel on how to lead in decarbonization issues. Just a wonderful program that I can't recommend highly enough. The other that I think is really interesting is the Chancery Lane Project. This is a group of lawyers who are getting together and creating very good template clauses on climate issues, and they're available for free on the Chancery Lane website. I go and check that out regularly just to see, hey, what's new, what's happening in terms of climate and clauses. What I haven't found and what I'm looking for, I actually reached out to you, Pamela, to ask you about this is, all right, where, ESG lawyers, or where do people who are focused on the whole breadth of subject hang out? That's starting to happen a bit with securities as you're getting into these materiality requirements from the SEC. More securities lawyers are gathering on this topic when they're having events. Also, M&A, kind of interesting. I just did a session with David Edgar this week on M&A in ESG, and we saw a post from another group of lawyers who were meeting to talk about M&A and ESG. So it's popping up a little bit in that context. But I'm not aware of, like a ESG lawyer club or anything yet.
That will be our next task.
Yeah. Yes.
Well,
I will look forward to you launching that, Pamela.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
Well, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you so much for your insights. I'm sure our audience has found them very useful and valuable and certainly thought-provoking. And for the listeners, I will put the recommended organizations and association links on the site when we launch this podcast. So thank you very much, Christine. I appreciate your time.
Wonderful. My pleasure.
Bye-bye.